The Denver Broncos just received a double shot of great news. First, they had an incredible offseason, addressing every major need and improving across the board. And second, the Kansas City Chiefs, they're unraveling. In this video, we're diving into insights from multiple respected sources who are sounding the alarm on the situation in Kansas City and why it could open the door for the Broncos to take control of the AFC West this season. ESPN's Adam Schefter recently commented that this is the most competitive the AFC West has ever been, and he doesn't see the Chiefs as a lock to win the division. Colin Cowherd echoed that sentiment, and even longtime Chiefs supporter Nick Wright admitted the team could stumble this year. Early predictions from outlets like Fox Sports have the Broncos winning the AFC West, and surprisingly, they list the Chargers in second place, not the Chiefs. In their projections, Kansas City barely slips into the playoffs as a wildcard team. Imagine Bo Nix getting a home playoff game against Patrick Mahomes. That would be something. So what's driving all this sudden doubt around Kansas City? There are several factors, but one of the biggest red flags goes back to the Super Bowl. It was one of the worst offensive performances in recent memory. Mahomes was sacked 6 times, and what's shocking is that none of those sacks came from blitzes. Every one of them came from standard 4-man pressures. It wasn't just a bad day. It exposed serious flaws in the Chiefs' offensive line. And instead of fixing those problems, they arguably made things worse in the offseason. That's a big problem when your quarterback is constantly under pressure without teams even sending extra defenders. Back-to-back sacks in that game highlighted just how fragile their protection really was. And if that trend continues, it could derail their entire season. On top of the sacks, Patrick Mahomes also threw a pick-6 in the Super Bowl, a rare and costly mistake. It was a rough performance, no question, but what's more concerning is how the Chiefs failed to learn from it. Let's not forget, Kansas City managed just 1 first down in the entire first half. The Eagles had more points at halftime than the Chiefs had total yards. That's not just a bad game, that's a red flag, and it's not an isolated one. Remember the game against the Broncos last season? Denver outplayed the Chiefs from start to finish. It came down to a blocked field goal at the end, but Bo Nix, as a rookie, outdueled Mahomes. He posted a higher QBR and a better overall rating. He looked more poised, more efficient, and more in control. The Broncos hit Mahomes 9 times in that matchup, and they didn't need to rely on exotic blitzes to do it. Even with some questionable penalties helping Kansas City late, Denver's defense made life miserable for Mahomes. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. The Chiefs played an unusual number of one-score games last season, and in the world of sports betting, that's often seen as a red flag for regression. Teams that win a lot of close games one year usually don't get the same breaks the next. But the most glaring issue? That offensive line. It wasn't just a Super Bowl meltdown, it was a season-long concern, and instead of strengthening their protection, the Chiefs made a head-scratching move. They signed left tackle Jalen Moore, a career backup from San Francisco, and paid him like a top-tier starter. Let that sink in. Moore has started just 12 games in 4 seasons and ranked near the bottom of all NFL tackles in PFF grades, 63rd out of 67 qualified players. And yet Kansas City handed him a major contract as if he were an anchor on the line. That's not a bold move. That's a gamble, and it could backfire in a big way. One of the biggest red flags about the Chiefs' offseason is their decision to sign Jalen Moore. Why? Because Moore was the backup to Trent Williams in San Francisco. And even with Williams nearing retirement, the 49ers made no effort to retain Moore. Think about that. The 49ers bent over backwards to convince other key players to return. They traveled to meet Dre Greenlaw, made personal appeals to Talanoa Hufanga. But when it came to Moore, nothing. They let him walk without a fight and collected a compensatory pick in return. That says a lot. If Moore was truly starting caliber, the 49ers wouldn't have let him go, especially with a Hall of Fame caliber left tackle like Williams about to retire. San Francisco clearly didn't see Moore as a viable replacement, but Kansas City still paid him like a cornerstone player, and the hits don't stop there. The Chiefs also let go of one of their top offensive linemen, a guard who earned the highest PFF grade at his position in 2024. They traded him to the Chicago Bears, and the Bears are thrilled to have him. This move again makes no sense for a team trying to protect their franchise quarterback. So let's recap. The offensive line that allowed 6 sacks in the Super Bowl without facing a single blitz got worse this offseason. The Chiefs replaced a Pro Bowl level guard with a third-round pick and brought in a backup tackle to protect Mahomes' blind side. That's not an upgrade, that's a downgrade and a dangerous one, and it doesn't stop at the line. DeAndre Hopkins, a future Hall of Famer chasing a Super Bowl ring, had a choice. Go back to Kansas City and play with Mahomes, or join the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. He chose Baltimore. That decision speaks volumes. Hopkins didn't see Kansas City as his best shot at a ring anymore. Add that to the uncertainty around Rashee Rice, who's coming off a serious knee injury, and suddenly this once feared Chiefs receiving corps looks shaky at best. Between the offensive line falling apart and questions at wide receiver, the foundation that kept the Chiefs on top is starting to crack, and the rest of the AFC West is ready to take advantage. And even when Rashee Rice returns, he'll be facing an 8-game suspension from the NFL. So at the start of the season, which is packed with tough matchups, the Chiefs will be without both Rice and DeAndre Hopkins. That's a nightmare scenario for any offense, but the trouble doesn't stop there. Kansas City's defense has taken major hits this offseason. Their highest graded defensive player during their entire Super Bowl run wasn't Chris Jones. It was Tershawn Wharton. And guess what? He's gone. The team couldn't re-sign him. Now they're left relying almost entirely on Chris Jones, who's still elite but aging, and Mike Pennell, who's nearly 35 and coming off a down year with a low PFF grade. That defensive line, once a strength, is suddenly a major concern, and the secondary also weakened. The Chiefs lost Justin Reed, one of their most consistent and highest-rated players on the back end. He played a huge role in their defensive success, and now they'll have to replace him with a younger, less proven option. Between losing Wharton, Reed, and key offensive linemen, the roster is taking hits in all the wrong places. It gets worse when you look at their cap situation. Kansas City has so much money tied up in stars like Mahomes and Kelsey that they couldn't afford to keep foundational players. So now they're forced to go all in on Travis Kelsey, and that might not be the winning formula it once was. Let's be honest, Father Time is catching up. Kelsey had 0 catches in the first half of the Super Bowl. Even when the Broncos played him, he didn't look like the unstoppable force we've seen in the past. Denver now has defenders like Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga who can match up with him physically and stay disciplined in coverage. NFL history tells us tight ends have a very specific peak, and once they pass it, the production tends to fall off a cliff. The Chiefs are betting big on a player entering that phase of his career. So let's sum this up. The Chiefs' offensive line got worse, their receiving corps is depleted, their defense lost multiple high-impact starters, and their most reliable offensive weapon is aging fast. This isn't the same Kansas City team that dominated the AFC, and that's exactly why the AFC West, especially Denver, has a golden opportunity to take the crown. Let's talk about Travis Kelsey, and more importantly, the age curve that no player can escape. Look at the history of tight ends in the NFL. There's practically no one in league history who peaked after the age of 37, and Kelsey is getting dangerously close to that number. His production is already showing signs of decline, and last season we saw it plain as day, including 0 first-half catches in the Super Bowl. At this point, Kelsey is juggling a podcast, off-field fame, and a highly publicized relationship. That's not a criticism, it's reality. Priorities shift, and football isn't the only thing on his plate anymore. Meanwhile, his brother has already stepped away from the game and is enjoying retirement. It wouldn't be a shock if Kelsey followed soon. None of this is hate, it's just the nature of the NFL. Father Time is undefeated, and betting your entire offense on an aging tight end just isn't a winning strategy. And the Chiefs aren't just relying on Kelsey, they're financially tied to their aging core. Over 63% of their cap space is locked into just 5 players. That kind of top-heavy roster construction is hard to maintain, especially when injuries, decline, and regression start to hit. Let's not forget the Chiefs won the AFC West for nearly a decade, which means they're constantly facing the toughest possible schedule. And last season, they relied heavily on one-score wins and narrow margins. That kind of luck doesn't usually carry over year to year, and betting lines already reflect that. This year's schedule, brutal. They open with a trip all the way to Brazil, then have to come back to face the Eagles in a Super Bowl rematch. That's followed by games against Baltimore, a hot weather road trip to face the Jaguars, then a wild environment in Detroit. They also play tough opponents like the Commanders, Bills, Colts, and Cowboys. Outside of maybe the Giants, there aren't many soft spots on that calendar. They'll be traveling more, they're older, and they've taken losses across the roster. Meanwhile, Denver's younger, hungrier, and reloaded. That Super Bowl window in Kansas City, it's not just closing, it's slammed shut. And while the Chiefs are trying to hold it together, Bo Nix and the Broncos just kicked in the front door.